Hello. It's just me tonight, guys. Just gonna jump on real quick and talk about Bell's Hingebacks. Hi, Harlan. It's really good to see ya. Harlan, where do you live? I would love to
Just
know
gonna
where you
jump
live.
on real quick and talk about Bell's Hingebacks. Hi, Harlan. It's really good to see you.
So I was hearing myself. Matthew's with us. Who's your turtles and tortoises? Podrick, good to see you. So yeah, tonight I just wanted to talk about the Bell's Hingebacks a little bit and kind of talk about that story. Hey Mark, how's it going? Um, Greg's Turtle Haven. Greg, do you have this shirt? Probably. My wife got this like at Kohl's or something. So, but next, yeah, flannel. You like it? Good stuff. Thanks, Matthew. Um, it's botanists wear flannel. Um, and I'm a botanist for 10 hours of the day. So um, I like this shirt too. So how's everybody doing? What's going on? We had like 4 inches of snow, and it was 25 degrees yesterday in Northeast Ohio. So that's our second winter. Um, we last weekend, the weekend before last, I was doing all kinds of stuff, building tortoise lids outside, and yeah. Um, then this weekend, cold, gray, um, but hopefully tomorrow it's going to be about 50 and rainy, so the salamanders hopefully will come out. My 12-year-old really wants to see salamanders this year, so we're going to do some herping. Hopefully tomorrow night, that would be awesome. So, yes, Mark, I'm a plant guy. I that is my profession. I love turtles and tortoises, and they have always been my number one. But once I realized how many different kinds of plants there are, I really got into plants. So, um, I spent time as a rare plant botanist for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and and then now I'm the curator of a 3,000 acre arboretum in Northeast Ohio and in a botanical garden in Cleveland. So that's what I do during the day. But I love salamanders, I love frogs, turtles. Those probably are my top animals. And, Ryan and I interviewed David Kelly on the Let's Talk Turtles podcast, and he really got into salamander. So back to Nepenthes. Mark, I have no Nepenthes. Those are these tropical pitcher plants, just amazing, uh, awesome things. I've never tried to grow them. So, but let's talk about the Bell's Hingeback. Um, has anybody here had one of these Bell's Hingebacks? Let me know. I don't have one with me. I have one left. Okay, it's in a quarantine area, so I just decided to do this from upstairs. But bottom line, 3 years ago, we started seeing these new hingebacks come in that were labeled Speaks Hingebacks, but we're like, no, these aren't Bell's Hingebacks. So Podrick, okay, yeah, he just retracted that. So 1929, huh? Podrick, you had a pair. Um, the first, for people that have been around a while, what we used to call Bell's Hingebacks in the 80s and the 90s are not what we had then. Um, Yeah, Greg, we will get you into hingebacks. Um, but Podrick, the animals that you had in 1991 most likely were the West African species of Bell's hingebacks, and that is what we now call the Western hingeback, Kinixys nogui. Now, at the time, they were called Bell's hingebacks. We all called them Bell's hingebacks. Kinixys Belliana nogui. The, and they were from West Africa. Um, but in 2000, yeah, Podrick, they were 99% certain. Like, I'm going to tell you 99.9% certain they were the Western subspecies, what we now call Kinixys nogui. The true Bell's hingeback, they're East African. Okay, so they are from places like Kenya and Uganda. We don't know where they intersect. In the Central African Republic, we're not really kind of unclear about that. They're in South Sudan. The Bells are, but the difference is the the Western Bells, the Nogui, the stuff we got in from West Africa. Those are they have four toenails on their front feet, and they tend to be brown. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Glades herp. I mean, they're probably from the West Africa. So they stopped being imported in 2000. Okay, you could not get a Bell's hingeback into the United States. The Kinixys Belliana. It absolutely was not allowed and not permitted. Anything Kinixys Belliana you couldn't import, along with leopard tortoises. Leopard tortoises have not been imported into the United States since 2000. And sulcatas. Sulcatas have not been imported into the United States. So for like 5-6 years, we didn't have any smooth shell hingebacks coming in. And then Mozambique started to export their hingebacks, and that's like probably around 2004, 2005, maybe. That is when the Speaks hingebacks started to be imported, and that's when Speaks hingebacks came on our radar. They were from Mozambique. That was pretty much the only country importing them. Before 2000, there's a fungus gnat flying around. There were no Speaks hingebacks in the U.S. Nobody was importing them because there were plenty of Western Bells or Noguis. So, once that stopped, the importers went and looked for new species. And yes, Podrick, you absolutely bought them as Bells, but they're from West Africa, and they're now what we call Nogui. We've done science, the Kindler and others paper. They elevated that Western subspecies. They have four toenails. So if you find any photos, they'll have four toenails. In the 2000s, all the way through 2018, we were getting Speaks hingebacks from Mozambique, right? And so those were the smooth-shelled hingebacks that we would see. Speaks hingebacks are by far the easiest hingebacks with smooth shells to identify because they're very elongated, and especially the males, and they're very flat on top. So when we look at Speaks hingebacks and identify Speaks hingebacks, we're not looking at coloration or pattern. That's all really, really variable in hingeback tortoises. What we look at is the morphology of the shell to help us identify the different species. It's within species, they can look very, very different. And so the smooth shell savanna type hingebacks that were imported from like 2004 all the way to 2018 were all Speaks hingebacks. So, you know, then in 2020 we started getting new Speaks Hinchbacks because Mozambique shut down export. So around 2018, that's when you stop seeing the Mozambique animals come in, and then um, you know, in 2020, new Speaks Hinchbacks started to be imported. Some of them actually were Speaks Hinchbacks. They had very flat shells on top. They looked very similar to the Bell's Hinchbacks, but Matthew asks, where would I put bells on the hardest to keep? So the problem is that all of these bells that have come in mislabeled as Speaks Hinchbacks are likely from the very same exporter. They're all likely infected with a pathogen called testudine intranuclear coccidiosis. And it's a highly contagious disease. You don't want it in your collection. And that is what's killing them. And that's what's making them so difficult to take care of. My basic hypothesis to date, and this, if I were a scientist, this is what I'd be testing, but we don't have the husbandry correct for those animals. So I passed for 2 years and said, I don't want anything to do with these Kenyan animals. But so many people joined the Hingeback group, and I just was like, man, I feel bad because I truly cannot offer any help for these Kenyan animals that are coming in. The reason we know they're not Speaks Hingebacks is because that they have dome shells. I mean, it's so easy to tell a Speaks Hingeback from a Bell's Hingeback. Speaks, I mean, it's flat, elongated. And Bells are just the opposite. They have these really, really high arching shells. So even though they were labeled Speaks Hingebacks, even though the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service let them come into this country as Speaks Hingebacks, they're not. They're Bell's Hingebacks. And we do think they have this nasty disease. Tink is horrible. It's awful. It's a novel disease, so we don't know much about it. We're learning more. There is a treatment now for it, but you don't want it in your collection because it's contagious. So Tink is a coccidia, Matthew. That's important to remember. But I have animals. My home's Hingebacks that I have, my 5, came from the Turtle Survival Alliance. So there's a theory that Tink might be endemic to Africa. I think that's a pretty good theory. It needs to be tested in the field. Yeah, absolutely. It's something that can be rapidly spread throughout a collection. Box turtles, tortoises. I have not read any specific reports on aquatic turtles, but it's nasty stuff, and it's out there. The only way you can test for it is either dissect a dead animal, or the University of Florida lab will do PCR tests. So these animals, these Bell's Hingebacks, they likely have Tink. I got 3 in April of 2022. I kept them inside and then kept them for like a month because I got them in April. They lived outside all summer. I thought they were doing great. I made a video. I built that giant enclosure, brought them inside. They lived together outside okay. I noticed maybe one was a little underweight, so just thought, yep, we need to boost the weight on that one. Within like 2 weeks after it moved inside, dead. it just precipitated rapidly. I did not have it tested for tink, but there's no doubt it was a tink situation. Absolutely, no doubt. I may have lost. I lost myself. There we go. So I'm back. And so the other one started going downhill. I took it to the vet. I started treatment with the medication. That's actually a anti-coccidia medicine that's used for horses. They just formulate it for tortoises, and then that one died. So now I'm down to one animal. It has, so basically what I think is that outside they like it. They do pretty well in our summers. It was a nice shaded spot. They ate, but if you keep tortoises together, you never know who's getting the food, and you never know whose feces you're looking at. They never had great feces. That was always a problem. It was always an issue. And at that point, there were other keepers that had positive tink tests. So we're like, yeah, these have tink. But the big question is here for me, it's husbandry, because these animals did pretty good outside, but I bring them in, even though I tried to keep the humidity up, like around 50 or 60%, they just seem like they decided to sleep all winter. And I would wake up my remaining animal, soak it, give it electrolytes in the water, simple homemade electrolyte solution, and then it would eat and then go back and sleep for a week. So I just kept doing that. It's still the same weight. It hasn't grown any. But finally, I did some research, and in Kenya, where these guys are from, number one, they're probably from higher elevations, so they moderate temperatures is what they like. But they have seasonal rains there, and unlike the West African hinchback, which has the rains in the like our summer is basically equivalent to their rainy season. These guys have two wet seasons and two dry seasons. So, maybe they're adapted to these short dry seasons where they just kind of chill for 2 months, waiting for the next rain to come. And then in our long, long winters, it was just too dry. So, anecdotally, if you guys get one of these, if you work with them, number one, wear gloves, biosecurity, quarantine them to the max. Number two, get a tink test done. And number three, if you're going to keep them inside, I would keep them really high humidity, like 90% closed chamber baby tortoise style, because that seems to have woken up the tortoise. And so, Matthew, your question, what I'm going to do is not give this animal any dry season. It's going to live outside in the summer. It's going to get really high humidity at night, because that's just what happens here in the Midwest in the summer. It's in a real shaded area, so it's cool. It's enclosure. And then when I bring it back inside, it is going to live in a 95% humidity situation year round, right? Because what I think is happening is maybe they have lower levels of the coccidia, and they can tolerate it for a time, but they get these extended dry periods, and they tend to just fade. So if you keep them outside and then bring them in the winter, I would strongly recommend have like a fogging system and a misting system. I'm gonna kind of treat them like a Jackson's chameleon. I don't have any basking spot. We're talking 70 degrees at nighttime, 80 degrees in the day. That's it. That's what they seem to respond to. Jeremy has also shared a few that he has some from the same group that I have, and they're all doing well, and he's kept them cool and humid. So for me, recognizing that they have Tink and understanding that they really don't do well cold and dry, moderate and humid is how I'm going to raise my remaining animal. Now, interestingly, Underground Reptiles doesn't have them anymore. It'll be interesting to see if they get them in again. So, okay, so that's the story I wanted to tell. Let's chat. So Matthew, a good friend, has been dealing with some Russians who seem to have been too dry. They would show slight signs of URI, but nothing major. Hoping the most moist soil will help come out of brumation. Absolutely. I mean, tortoises are so sensitive to temperature and humidity. I find it really fascinating, and I think we don't realize the importance of that. So, Podrick says stress of any kind can depress the immune system, and it's a disease they're able to live with goes nuts and they go downhill. Yeah, absolutely. So, these small animals, I personally think the reason why we're getting like 10 adults and then 100 4-inch tortoises is because they're being farmed. So these animals, they're growing up fine in Kenya on this farm, but you ship them, you stress them out, you ship them across the Atlantic Ocean, and put them in Florida for a while with a bunch of other tortoises at the importer's place, and then ship them out. Yeah, they're totally stressed. So unfortunately, this is the story of hingeback tortoises all over again, right? Nearly 1,000 of these things have been imported, and it's just horrible. So okay, so I have some fun news. For the day job, I'm actually going to go to Korea, South Korea of all places. And I thought, what better time to talk about Reeves turtles? So next week, I'm going to have Michael Thathuvaswamy, if I said that right, and I will be talking about Reeves turtles, guys, because I'm going to Korea for work and to learn about the plants and botanical gardens and flora of Korea in early April. So what do you think? Should I make some videos on this channel about Korea? Yeah. So I agree, Matthew. And, I think it's about time to get Michael on here and turn the microphone around and put the camera on him. So. Matthew, what is tape? Matthew says to tape all you can. I'm not really sure what tape is, so I have to get offline and ask you about that. So, what else? Are you guys getting your enclosures ready for summer? I know Greg down there in Georgia. I'm always jealous. He's like 2 months ahead of us here in the Midwest. So, videotape. Ah, I'm just kidding. I love it. I'll bring my phone, I think. So, yeah, there. Mark says video. So, I'm excited. There's not a lot of reptiles in Korea. What's fascinating is the flora is quite similar to our North American flora. So, they have oaks, they have maples, they have pines, they have spruces. So, it's exciting. But yes, yeah, Matthew says fire-bellied toads. Absolutely. That is kind of like the epicenter of fire-bellied toad land. So we're going to be there in the spring. So, I'm hoping that I'll see lots of fire-bellied toads. Mark says that he's under snow. We got a late round of snow, and then I saw that New England got a nor'easter. My in-laws are from Maine. They're currently in Florida. Um, Matthew says that David is getting him some babies. So some baby fire-bellied toads, Matthew. Podrick says he's dealing with something with Hermans. My nephew had 6 Hermans, 1.5 for 10 years. He moved them and they started dying off. He only had his 2 oldest females live. He brought them to me. He's kept them separate. Yeah, I don't know, Podrick. I mean, that's really concerning. I mean, for hingeback tortoises, they're just super sensitive, right? I got an animal, a really, really healthy male Western hingeback, when I started this journey again, and he didn't eat for like 6 weeks. He was perfectly healthy. He just didn't like it. So, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things about keeping some of the species of tortoises, man. They just, yeah. Hermans are hardy. So certainly one of the pathogens is a concern. A tink test is not cheap, and a broad panel is not cheap, but it is something to consider. I think that we as keepers need to be cognizant that these diseases happen. They're in our collection. We need to recognize that it's not going to ruin our lives if we get an animal, but there's real reasons to have good biosecurity protocols. There you go, Patrick. Matthew can hook you up. Matthew runs rescue, does a lot of work with tortoises in need. Another fun thing that I want you guys to go check out, a YouTube channel called The Tortoise Guy. It's my friend Kevin. I found him, he was recommended to me on YouTube. He has a tortoise rescue out in Los Angeles, and when I went to Disneyland in December, I sent him a message like, "Hey man, I'm here. Can I go look at your tortoises?" And sure enough, he was having like an activity there. So he and I, Kevin the Tortoise Guy, are going to be doing a collab, and it's going to come out on his channel. I hope this weekend. We've been working on it for a while, and he's got a lot going on. But yeah, check out the Tortoise Guy. Good friend. He loves tortoises. So I told him about the TTPG and all that stuff. So let's see. Patrick had the same thing with the Greek. He was doing fine and then suddenly went downhill and passed. I mean, that is the most frustrating thing about a tortoise, because they are these long-lived animals, right? And so it's slow, but it's quick. You just think they're going to rebound, or maybe they just got a little too cold, or your parameters weren't right. But man, it can happen quickly, and tink is something to really suspect if you have a tortoise that just suddenly, goes way downhill and dies quickly. It can be diagnosed pathologically during an autopsy. You can actually see these little coccidia. I don't know how they can get in the nucleus. I don't know how an animal can survive in the nucleus of another animal. It's kind of small, packed in there, but apparently this is novel, right? There aren't any other organisms that they know that get intranuclear coccidiosis, and quite frankly scares the crap out of me. What if this passes over to humans? Wouldn't that be horrible? I mean, can you imagine having a coccidia that lived in the nucleus of your cells? It'd be horrible. So, well, on a good note, yeah, I'm excited about going to Korea. That's going to be like the second and third week of April. Super cool. Going to see a lot of different things. So that's my story. Kind of wanted to just talk about Belliana and Tink. It's real. If you suspect any, any, if you have a tortoise die quickly, certainly screen for it. Work with your vet. Send the animal to the University of Florida lab, or contact the lab yourself. They might be able to do an autopsy. So Matthew says, yeah, I don't. He says the jump from reptiles to mammals would be very rare. I just don't want to be the first. So it's that's why I wear gloves. I think the important thing to remember, though, ultimately, is I have animals that were Tink positive. The Turtle Survival Alliance treated them, and they've been with me. It will be 5 years in October, and they've produced lots and yeah, exactly, lots of offspring. So Matthew, I do not want to be patient zero for Tink and people. So that would be horrible. Okay, guys. Well, thank you. I gotta go get start working with the tortoises. I've got a bunch of work, but thanks for hanging out with me. Like I said, Michael T. next weekend. And yeah, Hink. That's what we need. We need human intranuclear coccidiosis. So, Matthew would love if we did this longer, especially when I have the guests. I think that would be great too. It's just a matter of being able to get in all my animal care in time. So I appreciate you guys joining me. It was fun. Happy Wednesday, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.